If you've ever poured your soul into something, only to have someone else sign their name at the bottom, then you know what I'm talking about. You know that quiet, cold fire that starts in your gut. So hit that like button and let me know in the comments that I'm not just screaming into the void. It helps to know I'm not alone in this. The words that broke me were delivered in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. It was a Tuesday. The sky outside was the color of a dirty nickel. My boss, Marcus Thorne, leaned back in his chair, the cheap leather groaning in protest. He steepled his fingers, a gesture he'd copied from a movie about Wall Street sharks. It looked ridiculous on him, he said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. It was a team effort, Ivy. A tremendous team effort. And as a result, the board and I have decided to reallocate the commission from the Titan account into the general departmental bonus pool to reward everyone who contributed. I just stared at him. The Titan account. It wasn't an account. It was my Everest. 18 months of my life. 18 months of 6 a.m. flights to second-tier cities, of lukewarm hotel coffee, of memorizing the names of a client CEO's grandchildren and the specific vintage of scotch he preferred. 18 months of building a complex, bespoke software integration from the ground up, not just selling it. I was the architect, the diplomat, and the closer all-in-one. The commission wasn't just a number, it was validation. It was the down payment on a life I had postponed. It was $1.2 million. And he had just vaporized it with a phrase designed to sound noble and feel like a slap in the face. A team effort. The team had been me, and a handful of brilliant, underpaid developers I had personally shielded from Marcus's constant, chaotic meddling. The rest of the sales department thought the Titan account was a mythical beast. They wouldn't know the client's logo if it was tattooed on their foreheads. My heart didn't drop. It did something worse. It went still. It was the stillness of a predator that has just spotted its prey. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. I could feel the blood draining from my face, but I forced my expression to remain neutral, a mask of professional understanding I had perfected over 10 years at Innovatech Solutions. I nodded slowly, deliberately. I understand, Marcus. That makes sense. For the team. My voice was level. So level it was dead. I think it unnerved him. He was expecting tears, or yelling, or a desperate plea. He had a script ready for that. He didn't have a script for this quiet, absolute stillness. He shifted in his chair, the leather groaning again. Good, he said. A little too quickly. I knew you'd be a team player, Ivy. You always are. I stood up, my movements fluid and unhurried. I picked up my portfolio from the table. My knuckles were white where they gripped the leather, the only sign of the tectonic fury shifting beneath my surface. Is there anything else? I asked. He was already looking back at his monitor, dismissing me. No, that's all. Close the door on your way out. I walked out of his office. I didn't close the door. I left it wide open. It was a small act of defiance, a tiny crack in the dam, but it was a start. As I walked through the open-plan office, the sound of my heels on the polished concrete floor was the only sound I could hear. It was the sound of a countdown. The other employees, the ones who were part of the team, kept their heads down, their faces buried in their screens. They knew. Of course they knew. Corporate hypocrisy has a specific smell, and it was thick in the air. It wasn't about revenge. I told myself that. A new mantra taking root in the scorched earth of my loyalty. It was about balance. The scales had been tipped for far too long, and I was about to place a very, very heavy weight on my side. The drive home was a blur. I remember the grayness of the interstate, the brake lights of other cars bleeding into indistinct red smears. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with a kind of kinetic energy that had nowhere to go. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. The calm I'd projected in Marcus's office was a carefully constructed fortress, and now, alone in the sealed bubble of my car, the walls were beginning to crumble. I didn't cry. Crying felt like a waste of resources. This was something colder, deeper. It was a profound, hollow sense of erasure. 10 years. 10 years of being the one who stayed late to fix the proposals the real sales guys botched. 10 years of being the details person, the one who made sure the trains ran on time while others took the credit for the journey. I'd seen it coming, in bits and pieces, like a slow-motion car crash, but I'd ignored it. I'd told myself it was the price of admission. I had believed, with a foolish, stubborn loyalty, that competence would eventually be its own reward. I pulled into the sterile, underground garage of my apartment building. The silence was absolute. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine off, just breathing. In, out, a controlled process. I thought back to when I first joined Innovatech. I was young, ambitious, and I genuinely believed in the company's mission. Marcus had been my first manager. Back then, he had seemed like a mentor. He was charming, politically savvy, and he took me under his wing. He'd protected me once, during a round of layoffs. He'd made a big show of it, telling me, "I went to bat for you, Ivy. I told them you were indispensable." I felt a surge of gratitude then, a deep loyalty that I now realized was a carefully forged chain. He hadn't protected me because I was indispensable. He had protected me because I was useful. An asset is not the same as a team member. An asset can be leveraged, depleted, and eventually liquidated. The memories started to flood in, unbidden. There was the AeroCorp deal, 4 years ago. It was my strategy, my data, my pitch deck. I'd worked on it for 3 solid months, sleeping in the office twice. The night before the final presentation, Marcus called me into his office. He said the client was old-fashioned. They'd be more comfortable hearing the pitch from a senior VP. He would deliver it for the good of the team. I watched from the back of the room as he read my words, clicked through my slides, and accepted the applause. He got a 4-figure bonus for it. I got a pat on the back and a gift card for a coffee shop. I swallowed it. I told myself it was a learning experience. Then there was the slow, dawning horror of the Titan account. Alistair Vance, the CEO of Titan Industries, was a man carved from granite. He was old school, a handshake-in-your-word kind of man. He didn't trust slick salesmen, and he definitely didn't trust Marcus, whose idea of building a relationship was a round of golf and an expensive steak. I had found another way in. I learned that Vance was a passionate amateur historian, obsessed with Roman aqueducts. So I read about them. I learned about pozzolanic concrete and the engineering genius of Vitruvius. On our first real call, instead of launching into a sales pitch, I asked him about the structural integrity of the Pont de Garde. The call was supposed to last 30 minutes. We talked for 2 hours. That's how I got in the door. Not as a vendor, but as a person. Over the next year, I built that relationship brick by brick, with trust, with competence, and with genuine human connection. I learned about his wife's battle with cancer, the name of his golden retriever, his frustration with the inefficiencies in his own company. I wasn't selling him software. I was solving his problems. Marcus saw the deal getting bigger and bigger, and his involvement became more and more superficial, swooping in at the last minute for a photo op or a celebratory dinner he'd had no part in arranging. He was a vulture circling a kill he was too cowardly to make himself. And that's when the other, darker memories surfaced. The subplot to this whole ugly drama. It started about a year ago, a quiet tremor in the data. I was reviewing an invoice for one of our long-standing clients, a logistics firm, and I saw a line item that made no sense. Legacy system maintenance fee. We had decommissioned their legacy system 2 years prior. It was a small charge, only a few $1,000s, easily lost in a multi-million-dollar contract. I flagged it to our finance department. The ticket was closed a day later with a note, "Clerical error, resolved." But I'm a details person. It's my superpower and my curse. I saw the same line item on another client's invoice the next month, and another. It was never for a new client, always for the old ones, the ones with complex, sprawling contracts, the ones whose accounting departments were too swamped to notice a small leak. I went to Marcus. I laid out the data on his desk. 3 separate instances. "I think we have a systemic billing issue," I said. He glanced at it for less than a second. "It's an accounting quirk, Ivy. The system is old. Don't waste your time on it. Focus on closing Titan." His dismissal was too fast, too casual. It was the way you'd shoo away a fly. That was my first real warning sign. My loyalty had been a shield, blinding me to the obvious. My boss wasn't just a credit-stealing egomaniac. He was a thief. That night, I went home and did something that probably violated a dozen clauses in my employment contract. I bought a new laptop, a burner, and an encrypted military-grade solid-state drive. I started building a parallel system, a shadow ledger. I began to dig, not like a sales lead, but like a forensic accountant. I spent my nights and weekends poring over raw data exports, cross-referencing work orders with billing codes, system logs with invoices. The picture that emerged was terrifyingly simple. Someone was using a deprecated master billing code, one that was supposed to have been disabled years ago, to inject these ghost service fees into our biggest accounts. The code was tied to a single user profile, Marcus Thorne. I needed more than just my own analysis. I needed a witness. I needed someone on the inside. That's where Sarah came in. Sarah was a junior analyst in the finance department, brilliant, terrified, and utterly invisible to the executive team. I'd met her a few months prior. Her direct manager, a crony of Marcus's, had been publicly berating her in a meeting for finding an error in his quarterly forecast. He was trying to humiliate her. I saw the raw talent and the fear in her eyes. After the meeting, I found her in the break room, trying not to cry. I told her she was right about the forecast. I showed her how to present the data in a way that was irrefutable, so they couldn't attack her. They could only address the facts. I became her unofficial mentor. I taught her how to navigate the shark-infested waters of Innovatech. I bought her coffee, I reviewed her reports, and I championed her to other managers. I built a bridge of trust. A few weeks into my secret investigation, I took a risk. I showed Sarah a single, anonymized invoice with the ghost fee. I didn't tell her what I suspected. I just asked, "Have you ever seen a code like this?" Her face went pale. She nodded, her eyes wide. She'd seen it. She'd been told to ignore it. She thought she was going crazy. I knew then that I had an ally, a very scared, very junior, but very crucial ally. Back in my car, in the concrete tomb of the parking garage, my phone buzzed. It lit up the darkness. A text message. It was from Alistair Vance, the CEO of Titan, the man Marcus was stealing from, the man whose trust I had spent a year and a half earning. The message was simple. "Looking forward to our dinner tonight, Ivy. Always a pleasure. Let me know which bottle of Macallan to bring." He'd remembered that I loved Macallan 18, a detail, a small human detail. And that was it. That was the catalyst, the text message, a simple act of decency and respect from the man my boss was robbing blind, was like a lightning strike in the dark. The cold, hollow feeling in my chest didn't disappear. It solidified. It transformed from despair into something else entirely. It became a diamond, hard, clear, and sharp. The resignation I had been drafting in my head for hours was no longer a document of defeat. It was a declaration of war. A quiet war, fought not with shouting and anger, but with spreadsheets and evidence. It wasn't about revenge. It was about a reckoning. Marcus and Innovatech hadn't just stolen my commission. They had weaponized my integrity against me. They had used the trust I built with clients as a shield for their own corruption. They thought my greatest asset was my ability to sell. They were wrong. My greatest asset was my credibility, and I was about to liquidate it, but not in the way they thought. I was about to cash it in for myself. The resolve that settled in my bones was absolute. I went up to my apartment, a minimalist space of white walls and clean lines that suddenly felt like a command center. The grief and shock from the last few hours evaporated, replaced by a crystalline focus. I didn't turn on the lights. I worked by the glow of the city outside my window. This wasn't a plan I was creating in a fit of pique. It was a plan I had been unconsciously building for months. A contingency, a parachute I'd been weaving, thread by thread for the day I knew was always coming. I pulled the burner laptop from its hiding place, tucked away in a false bottom of my closet. The machine was clean, untraceable, not a single digital fingerprint connecting it to Innovatech's network. I powered it on and plugged in the encrypted drive. The drive wasn't just a collection of files, it was an arsenal. For the past year, every time Marcus dismissed my concerns, every time I saw another ghost fee slip through, I had escalated my efforts. My quiet alliance with Sarah in finance had become a clandestine operation. She was my deep throat, my source in the belly of the beast. I thought about the risks she was taking. Sarah was young, with student loans and a family to support, but she had a spine of steel I'd helped her discover. A month ago, she had sent me a panicked message. They were promoting a new CFO, another one of Marcus's sycophants. The new guy was talking about a systems audit and data purge to streamline operations. We both knew what that meant. They were planning to scrub the evidence. The timeline had accelerated. We had worked feverishly, in stolen moments, and late-night encrypted chats. Sarah, using a diagnostic tool I'd told her about, had managed to pull the complete, unredacted server logs from the main billing system, the raw data, the digital DNA of the fraud. She had sent it to me via a secure, one-time use transfer protocol. The file was massive. It contained every transaction, every user login, every keystroke associated with the billing platform for the past 3 years. It was the smoking gun, the murder weapon, and the confession all rolled into one. I spent the next 2 hours working with an intensity I didn't know I possessed. I wasn't just a sales lead anymore. I was an intelligence analyst. I cross-referenced the server logs with the invoices I had collected. The pattern was undeniable. The ghost fees always appeared within 24 hours of Marcus logging into the system using a specific administrative backdoor. The fees were applied, and then the logs of his access were partially scrubbed by a secondary automated script. But the script was sloppy. It deleted the primary log entry, but it didn't delete the system's own internal checksums and shadow records. It was like a burglar who wipes his fingerprints off the door handle but leaves a muddy footprint on the rug. And I had photographs of every single footprint. I compiled everything into a single, devastatingly simple document, a dossier. No emotion, no accusations. Just a timeline, a list of transactions, and the corresponding irrefutable data from their own servers. It was a clean, professional execution. But evidence of a crime was only one half of the equation. I wasn't a whistleblower. Whistleblowers end up broke and ostracized, celebrated as martyrs years after their lives are ruined. I was an architect. I was building my exit. 6 months ago, on the day Marcus first told me to stop wasting my time on the billing issue, I had spent my lunch break on a legal services website. I formed a limited liability company. I called it Veritas Solutions. Veritas, the Roman goddess of truth. It was a private joke, a seed planted in darkness. I had a business bank account, a registered agent, and a bare-bones website I'd built myself. It was a shell, a ghost company waiting for a soul. Tonight, I would give it one. I started drafting the second document. It was a proposal from Veritas Solutions to Titan Industries. It was as elegant and ruthless as the dossier. It detailed a seamless transition of their account from Innovatech to my new firm. The value proposition was simple and brutal. First, a new radically transparent billing system. Every line item would be tied to a specific work order, and a verifiable time log. No more ghost fees, no more accounting quirks. Second, an immediate 15% reduction in their annual service cost. I didn't have to cut corners or slash my own margins to offer this. I just had to not steal from them. The 15% was Marcus's fraud margin. Third, and this was the master stroke, a guarantee of zero operational disruption. Why? Because the key personnel, the senior developers, the project managers, the support engineers who had actually built and maintained the Titan system were coming with me. I hadn't needed to stage a coup. I just had to open a door. Over the past few months, as my disillusionment with Marcus grew, I had started having quiet coffees with the people I trusted, the real team. I never said I was leaving. I never asked them to jump ship. I just listened. I listened to their frustrations about their low pay, about their ideas being ignored, about the stifling bureaucracy that Marcus had built to protect his own position. I heard the same story over and over. They were loyal to the work, not the company. They were loyal to me. I had a list of 4 key people: the lead architect of the Titan integration, 2 senior developers, and the top-tier support specialist. I had already spoken to a headhunter friend. I knew what it would take to hire them. Their salary demands were surprisingly modest. All they really wanted was to be paid fairly and to work in a place where their contributions were valued. My phone buzzed again. It was Sarah. A single, short message. He just put in a shred order for all Q3 auxiliary billing hard copies, EOD tomorrow. The panic was a cold spike in my chest, but I pushed it down. He was getting sloppy. He was trying to cover his tracks. It meant he was nervous. It meant he knew, on some level, that he was exposed. I replied, "Stay safe. It will be over soon. Thank you." I put the finishing touches on the proposal. I printed both documents, the dossier of fraud and the proposal for a new beginning, on high-quality bond paper. I slipped them into two separate, elegant black folders. I looked at the two folders sitting on my dining table. One represented the end of a story, the other, the beginning of a new one. My reflection in the dark window was a stranger, someone calmer and more dangerous than the woman who had walked into work that morning. This wasn't just about a stolen commission anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about a fundamental principle. You don't get to burn down a house and still keep the insurance money, especially not when the architect is still holding the blueprints. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring order to a universe that Marcus had thrown into chaos for his own selfish gain. The dinner with Alistair Vance was in 1 hour. It wasn't a farewell dinner. It was an initial public offering, and I was the only stock worth buying. The restaurant was an island of quiet elegance in the chaos of the city. Low lighting, dark wood, the gentle clink of silverware on porcelain. It was the kind of place where conversations happened in hushed tones, where power was a currency more valuable than money. Alistair Vance was already there, seated at a corner table, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He stood as I approached, a gesture of old-world respect that Marcus, for all his posturing, would never have managed. He was in his late 60s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from a mountainside, all sharp angles and deep-set, intelligent eyes. "Ivy," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Good to see you." He gestured to the chair opposite him. I brought the Macallan. He had the bottle and 2 glasses on the table. He poured me a measure without asking. We started with small talk, the weather, the markets, a recent book on Roman history he'd enjoyed. He was testing the waters, a habit of a man who had navigated decades of corporate intrigue. He spoke about the final phase of the Titan integration, praising its seamless execution. He said, "Your team is extraordinary, Ivy. You've built a well-oiled machine." "That's what we do, Alistair," I replied, my voice steady. "We build things to last." He took a slow sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving mine. "So, what's next for you? Marcus tells me you're a lifer at Innovatech, that they're grooming you for the C-suite." The words hung in the air between us. This was the moment, the pivot point. I took a breath. I had rehearsed this in my head 100 times on the drive over, but now the words came easily, unforced. "Actually, Alistair, I'm resigning from Innovatech. My last day was today." His expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise? No, it was validation, as if he had suspected something was wrong. He leaned forward slightly. "I see. Was this a sudden decision?" "It was a decision that has been solidifying for some time." I said, "I believe that a business relationship, any relationship really, must be built on a foundation of absolute trust and transparency. When that foundation is compromised, the entire structure is at risk." He nodded slowly, understanding. "Before I discuss my future, however, I have a professional and ethical obligation to you. As the architect of your system, I feel responsible for its integrity, and I have discovered a profound structural flaw." I slid the first black folder across the polished wood of the table. It made a soft, definitive sound. He looked at the folder, then at me. He didn't open it immediately. He held my gaze for a long moment, then he picked it up. He read in silence. I just sat there, sipping my scotch, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But on the outside, I was a statue. I watched his face. It was a study in controlled emotion. The initial curiosity hardened into a grim, tight line around his mouth. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the pages. He wasn't a man given to theatrics. There was no gasp of shock, no angry outburst. There was only a growing, cold fury that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air around our table. He read every page, his eyes missing nothing. When he reached the last page, the summary of inflated invoices totaling just over $3.2 million over 18 months, he closed the folder very deliberately. He placed it on the table, perfectly aligned with the edge. He looked up at me. The warmth was gone from his eyes, replaced by glacial ice. He said one word. When? When did I know? That's what he was asking. It was a test, the most important test of all. I had to be honest. I started suspecting about a year ago. I confirmed the pattern and the mechanism 6 months ago. I've been gathering irrefutable proof since then. I brought it to Marcus's attention multiple times. He told me I was mistaken. So you've known for 6 months that my company was being systematically robbed by your boss, and you're telling me now. His voice was flat, dangerous. This was the precipice. My entire future depended on my next words. Yes, I said, meeting his gaze without flinching, because for 6 months I held onto a professional and perhaps naive belief that I could fix the problem from within. I believed I needed to have an unassailable mountain of evidence before I could make my move. An accusation without proof is just slander. And more importantly, Alistair, I could not bring you a problem of this magnitude without also bringing you a solution. That would be irresponsible. That would be leaving you stranded. I pushed the second folder across the table. He looked at it. The cover was blank, except for a single embossed word, Veritas. He opened it. He began to read the proposal. As he read, I saw the tension in his shoulders begin to ease. The hard line of his mouth softened. A slow, grim smile touched his lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a king who has just been handed the keys to his enemy's castle. He read the offer of a 15% cost reduction. He read the guarantee of zero disruption. He saw the names of the key personnel I had listed. He knew those names. He knew they were the ones who had made his project a success. He closed the second folder. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me, really looked at me. As if for the first time, he picked up his glass of scotch and raised it. My legal team will be serving Innovatech with a notice of contract termination for cause first thing in the morning, citing fraudulent billing practices. They will also be requesting a full audit and reimbursement. I suspect that will be a rather unpleasant conversation for Mr. Thorne. He paused, taking a sip. Their second call of the day will be to your new firm to execute this agreement. To Veritas, Ivy. I raised my glass, my hand perfectly steady now, to Veritas, Alistair. The next morning, I was sitting in a small, temporary office space I had rented by the month. It was little more than a white box with a desk and a chair, but it felt like a throne. My phone started buzzing just before 9 a.m. It was a stream of frantic texts from Sarah. It's happening. Vance's lawyers are on a conference call with the entire board. Marcus is in the glass conference room. He's gone pale. A few minutes later, they're asking for the billing records. Marcus is saying they're in storage. He's lying. I can see his screen. He's trying to access the old server. Another text. The server isn't responding. He's starting to sweat. I smiled. Sarah, following my instructions from the night before, had rerouted the DNS for that specific legacy server to a dead IP address. To Marcus, it would look like a system failure, an unfortunate, untraceable coincidence. Another text. Legal just confirmed the contract has a gross negligence clause. They can terminate immediately. He's trying to call Vance. It's going straight to voicemail. He's yelling now. The final text from Sarah arrived just before lunch. He's blaming me. He's telling them the junior analyst must have screwed up the data migration. They're not buying it. The board is looking at him like he's a piece of meat. I put my phone down. The silent takeover was complete. The noise I had been hearing for years, the bluster, the politics, the empty corporate jargon, had fallen silent. All that was left was the clean, quiet hum of consequence. The fallout was faster and more brutal than I could have ever imagined. News travels at the speed of light in the rarefied air of enterprise software. Alistair Vance wasn't just any client. He was a titan of industry, a bellwether. When he moved his 9-figure account from a major player like Innovatech to an unknown, brand-new firm, people didn't just notice, they investigated. The official press release from Titan Industries was a work of art, drafted by Vance's famously ruthless legal team. It announced a new strategic partnership with Veritas Solutions, a next-generation consultancy focused on radical transparency and operational integrity. It didn't mention Innovatech by name, but it didn't have to. The omission was louder than any accusation. My phone, which had been silent apart from Sarah's updates, began to ring. The first call was from the CTO of a large logistics company, one of the first accounts where I had spotted the fraudulent billing. I had a deep relationship with him, built over years of putting out fires that Marcus had started. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Ivy, I saw the Titan announcement. I have a feeling I should be auditing my invoices from Innovatech. Can you help me with that?" I smiled. "I would be happy to, Jim. I'll send a team over this afternoon, free of charge." By the end of the day, 2 more of Innovatech's flagship clients had initiated formal audits, citing the Titan move. The exodus had begun. It wasn't poaching. I didn't need to steal clients. They were running from a burning building, and I was the one holding the fire extinguisher. The 4 key employees I had targeted tendered their resignations simultaneously at 4 p.m. They walked out of the Innovatech building, their personal belongings in small boxes, and came directly to my small, white-walled office. We celebrated with cheap pizza and expensive champagne. It felt like a victory. The desperate countermove came at 6 o'clock that evening. An unknown number flashed on my phone. I answered. It was Marcus. His voice was unrecognizable. The arrogant, condescending bluster was gone, replaced by a thin, reedy panic. "Ivy, thank God. I've been trying to reach you." I said nothing. I just let the silence stretch. "Listen," he said, his voice cracking. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding, a systems glitch, a clerical error. You know how it is. We can fix this. I've already spoken to the board. We're prepared to offer you the full Titan commission, all of it, and a promotion. Vice President of Strategic Accounts. You can name your price. We need you to talk to Vance. You're the only one he'll listen to. We need you to bring him back." I listened to his pleading, to the pathetic desperation of a king who had been dethroned and didn't understand how. I thought about the years of stolen credit, the condescension, the casual dismissal of my work and my worth. I thought about the gift card he gave me for the AeroCorp deal. I let the silence hang for another 10 seconds, an eternity on a phone call. Then I spoke, my voice calm and devoid of any emotion. "The time for that has passed, Marcus. My only advice to you is to find a very good lawyer. I hear Titan Industries has some of the best." Then I hung up. I blocked his number. The power shift was complete. It hadn't happened in a shouting match or a dramatic boardroom confrontation. It had happened in a quiet restaurant with a folder full of facts. It had happened with a text message from a loyal ally. It had happened when I finally decided that my value was not something to be granted by others, but something to be declared by me. Marcus had thought he was playing checkers, moving his pieces around the board to corner me. He never realized I was playing chess, and his king had been in checkmate for 6 months. The final act didn't play out with a bang, but with the quiet, inexorable logic of cause and effect. A week after my dinner with Alistair Vance, a small, terse press release appeared on a financial newswire. Innovatech Solutions announces leadership restructuring to position for future growth. The corporate jargon was a thin veil over the bloody truth. Marcus Thorne was out, effective immediately, to pursue other opportunities, the industry's polite euphemism for being fired in disgrace. Sarah sent me a screenshot of the internal email, her text underneath reading simply, "He's gone." They gave him a cardboard box. I felt a flicker of something, but it wasn't triumph. It was a quiet, solemn sense of order being restored. The system had corrected itself. His own greed and arrogance had been the instruments of his downfall. I had simply held up a mirror and forced him to look. My own world, in contrast, was expanding. The small, white-walled office was quickly outgrown. Within 2 months, Veritas Solutions had moved into a proper office space on the 34th floor of a downtown skyscraper. It was a space I designed myself, all glass and light and open, collaborative spaces. There were no corner offices. My desk was out in the open, the same as everyone else's. My team, which had started with 4 key defectors, had grown to 15. The best and brightest from Innovatech, tired of the old regime, had been quietly reaching out. I didn't have to recruit them. They came to me. Sarah was my chief operating officer. She had a confidence and a poise I had only seen glimpses of before. She had found her power. Our client roster grew. After we successfully clawed back over $7 million in fraudulent charges for our first 3 clients, our reputation was solidified. We were the truth tellers, the giant killers. Companies started hiring us not just to manage their software integrations, but to audit their existing vendors. We had become the industry's watchdog. It wasn't the business I had set out to build, but it was the one the market demanded. One afternoon, about 6 months after it all began, Alistair Vance came to our new office for a board meeting. He wasn't just a client anymore. He had become a mentor and had taken a small advisory stake in Veritas. We stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. The sky was a brilliant, clear blue. He looked at the bustling office behind us, at the focused, energetic team working together. He said, "You didn't just build a company, Ivy. You built a culture. You took the best parts of that old place and rebuilt it without the rot." I thought about his words. He was right. It was never about burning Innovatech to the ground. It was about salvaging the valuable parts, the people, the work ethic, the innovation, and giving them a new, healthier foundation to build upon. My name was on the door now. My name was on the contracts. My name was on the paychecks of 22 employees who trusted me with their careers. The vindication wasn't in Marcus's failure. It was in our success. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the profound, quiet satisfaction of creating value instead of just taking it. It was about building something that would last. I looked out at the horizon, a clean, clear line stretching to infinity. For the first time in a very long time, I felt balanced. So what's the moral of the story? It's not as simple as take no prisoners or an eye for an eye. It's about understanding what you're truly worth. For years, I allowed my value to be defined by others, by a title, by a commission check, by a pat on the back from a man who saw me as a resource to be exploited. The betrayal, as painful as it was, forced me to do my own accounting. And I realized my real value wasn't in the deals I closed. It was in the trust I built. It was in the systems I designed. It was in my name, my reputation, my integrity. Those are assets that no one can steal. They can only be given away. And I had stopped giving them away for free. They thought they were just taking a percentage of a deal. What they didn't understand is that they weren't taking a slice of the pie. They were taking my name off the blueprint. And the architect always knows how to build it again, but better. This time, without the structural weaknesses that allowed the rot to set in. People still ask me if it was about revenge, and I always tell them the same thing. It wasn't about revenge. It was about a market correction. The market, in its wisdom, corrects for inefficiencies. And a system that rewards empty suits and punishes true competence is the most inefficient system of all. So I'm talking to you now, to anyone who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased. Your worth is not determined by the people who refuse to see it. It is inherent. It is in your skills, your integrity, and your resilience. Sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to stop playing and build your own. It's the scariest and most liberating thing you will ever do. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that fire in your gut, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. It lets me know that these stories matter. Leave a comment below and tell me about a time you had to reclaim your own value. I read every single one, and if you want to be the first to know when the next chapter of this journey gets told, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell, because we're all architects of our own lives, and it's time to start building.